My guest today is the wonderful Soulla Demetriou. I first met Soulla a few years ago in September 2017 when I was fortunate enough to pay attention to a prompt in my voice, in my inner voice, that said what I really needed to do was go on a yoga retreat. And it was at a time in my life when I had voluntarily taken a sabbatical from work as a response to stress, grief, very challenging menopause, and during the 3 months that I'd taken, I'd had this sort of promise that I was going to go away for a week on my own. And as I came to the end of that time, I realised it was the one thing that I hadn't done. And so I looked online, and by chance there was one space left on a yoga retreat in Ibiza. And when I arrived, I knew I had a choice ahead of me, either to bring into that retreat all of the stuff that I've been carrying with me, all of my strategies, all of my defense mechanisms, all of my beliefs, all of my stories that I carried about myself, or I could come into that retreat naked, metaphorically. And I am very grateful to the woman that I was then, that I chose to walk through the doors of that villa, shedding the stuff that really didn't serve me. And I was greeted by this kind, beautiful, smiling, generous, wise woman who said, "I'm a hugger," and held out her arms and drew me in to her. And that moment was transformational in my life. I went back to Ibiza twice more to retreats run by Soulla, and I am deeply grateful that in the time between those retreats and in the time since, she has become someone who I can call a friend. And I am so pleased that she's joining us today. I'm just waiting for her to turn up. She's currently in Costa Rica. She spends her winters there and the rest of the year in Ibiza. I know, it all sounds just too good to be true. And she has such a depth of knowledge around the work it takes to deepen our self-awareness with self-compassion, and she's definitely someone that I count as one of my teachers. And so I really look forward to wherever this conversation takes us, and just to hearing more around what it is that has most served her in her life, and sharing some of the wisdom that she can with us over the next half an hour, however long this takes. All right, my darlings, I will see you in a moment once Soulla gets here. So Soulla, my darling, I realised actually as I was doing the intro, I said Soulla Demetriou, and then I just thought, I don't think I've ever said your surname before, because to me, you're simply Soulla. So how do I say your surname?
You said it perfectly.
Did I?
Demetriou.
Demetriou.
Yeah, good work. It's a good
Excellent.
start.
Thank you very well. Thank you very well. Soulla, my darling, sweet, kind and generous teacher friend is how I think of you. That would be my title if I sort of wrote your name and then like what you are underneath. I in my intro I did a little bit about how we first met, and it was September 2017. It
Wow.
feels like I've known you for a lot longer than that.
Mm.
But the time that I spent with you on the Soulshine Retreats was truly transformational, and I credit it with being so much of what brought me to this work. So I am possibly either about to burst into tears or hysterical
Me too.
laughter. It's like one or the other.
Which is basically how we spend our Soulshine retreats together, somewhere in the space between crying and laughing. Completely normal.
Oh, and yes, and that feeling of complete openness and complete vulnerability, actually, which I think is that space between crying and laughter and both ends of the spectrum.
Mm.
And I have been so looking forward to this conversation, just to share a little bit of you with other people who I love, who are listening now, and to be able just to spend a little bit of time just talking about the work that you do, but also what brought you into
Mm.
the work that you do. And yeah.
Oh, Henny Penny. It's such an honor to be here. I just feel like, gosh, like how far have we come? I mean, how much has happened since we met? And I feel like we did actually cross over from that space of, you know, me being the teacher to us becoming friends and women on this journey, sharing this journey, which is such a gift for me as well. And I can say straight back to you, I'm in awe of you and everything you've done and created, and the space that you're inhabiting in the world, and your writing, so beautiful. So I'm very honored to be here as well and to know you, my white witch mermaid friend. I'm sure
Which is
everyone will agree that it's a very accurate description of you.
the White Witch Mermaid. I'm sure there was something else that you used to kind of throw in there every now and again as well. I can't remember quite what it was.
I mean, it just depended on the moment.
And bless you and thank you. Just to honour a little moment.
We could spend the whole thing just honoring each other,
Yeah,
couldn't we?
exactly. Just saying, no, you're great. No, you're great. And
No, you, honey.
I want to ask you if you can encapsulate part at least of what has brought you to the work that you do. But first, it might be useful just to explain to people about the work that you do actually. So obviously, there's the retreats, and you just talk to us a little bit about the work that you, what kind of, yeah, the work that you do, how it's sort of shifted from the retreats into where you are now,
Mm.
and what brought you into that work. Over to you, Soulla.
It's me. Okay. Where do I begin? It's actually really hard to know where. It's almost hard to begin at the end, because the end just doesn't exist without everything that came before, obviously. And my journey has completely guided the way I step into the work that I do in the space. It's not really even work, it's a way of being that I guess translates into what we call and know as a company. But it's so much more than that. I would say it's a dharma. It's kind of my soul contract and purpose in this lifetime. And soul shine for me really embodies the concept of the shadows and the light still shining through. You know, it's not just about the light. It's always been about how can we navigate our shadows, our wounds, the darkness, the pain, the suffering within us, and understand that our true nature is still light, is still love, and is still there. the image and the story that always stayed with me with Soulshine is of the lotus flower, which I'm sure you're familiar with and I've spoken about. But it's like I always have this image of the lotus flower because it starts in the darkest, murkiest of waters, like swamps, and it has to kind of grow through this darkness until it rises to the surface. And despite all the challenges and the hardships along the way to get there, the struggles, it still comes to the surface and is able to manifest into its beauty and its and all its potential. And for me, that's been my journey. It has been through the swamp in so many ways. It has been a journey of struggle, emotional struggle, and yet beneath it has been a coming back again and again to what is true, our true nature, and the possibility of healing and coming back to our light. So I suppose if I were to, capture Soulshine, it really would be that. On our retreats, everyone gets a journal, and it has a quote on it, which is the Hafiz quote. And it's, I wish I could show you when you're lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. And there you go. That would be my job title. And that's been my journey.
So that journaling process is what led me to write the very first My Darling Girl as an outcome of one of the sessions that we had out on the yoga deck and your beautiful invitation to write.
It gives me goosebumps. That's something so beautiful was birthed from that moment. And that
go Soulla.
Yeah, I mean, the essence of that is, in a way, almost if we were to go to the very simplest form of all the layers of processes and approaches and healing that, I try and integrate into the work that I do, it kind of comes down to that, my darling girl. It really comes down to, if we can capture one thing, it's like, can we just turn towards ourselves with the tenderness and love and willingness to see ourselves and be there? If we can do one thing, then let that be it. But again and again and again and again. So,
and that leads me to something that we were talking about before we pressed record, which was your reflection on the work that you're doing now. And I know we'll come on to talk about that, but the work that you're doing now being, I'm curious about how all of those learnings that you have taken from observing the hundreds of women that came through Soulshine and came through those retreats, the restoration that they experienced and the inner transformation. I know you use the term alchemy, as sort of part of, what describes the internal change that people can experience. And just, your experience of having observed those women going through that program, inverted commas, that you created, but also being able to see the kind of magic that actually happens when you bring a group of people together and are able to hold that space for them. I think that for me was one of my most profound observations of my experience within those retreat environments.
Yeah, I mean, the groups coming together really is alchemy. I think very early on in running retreats, if ever I doubted the concept of synchronicity or trusting how things are meant to be in a way, if I ever had a doubt, just seeing how people came together on retreat just showed me there was some kind of magic, because who came together, it was almost bizarre sometimes, the way exactly the right people were there for the lessons, the journeys, the support, the connection that was needed. And I know, like, in your groups, you connected to, I mean, like, such a sisterhood that has continued of lifelong friendships, I would imagine. And And that was true of many of the women who pass through our doors. It's our nature. I think especially, well, actually, I was about to say especially as women, but without digressing too much, I think it's always been available for women traditionally. I would love for men to have that space as well. Honestly, I don't know how men get by through life without the space that we have as women. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I think that is our way to come together as women and be honest and be vulnerable and be wise and share our experiences and support. And so much happens when we're just seen in our honesty, in our truth. And a lot of what I tried to create on retreat was a space where we did everything. So I used to talk about our retreats being luxurious, and I believe, you know, we tried to create a luxurious experience in terms of venue and beautiful food and everything thought through. But I felt that luxury was almost in the way that we didn't want you to have to think about a thing. And it kind of started from this perfectionist part of me that wanted everything perfect. But very early on, I started seeing the power and potency of that, which is we are so busy and caught up in our lives that when we take all the stuff away, all the roles away, all the doing away, it can be scary as hell, because then we have to connect to what is. Then we have to see what we're hiding behind. It can be very uncomfortable. As much as we lament how busy we are, as much as we lament how everything's on our shoulders, when it's all taken away, it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And that's when our stuff has the space to be seen and we can
So
feel. And I think, yeah, and that's, I mean, that happened almost by accident, you know, because this is the process of learning, like, oh, okay, this is
and
interesting.
so that thing, I'm just so mindful, just listening to you there and observing scenes in my head of women. So we're talking about, you know, generally speaking, a sort of a kind of female trait, but obviously recognizing it's a gross generalization. But sort of watching kind of friends or women on the retreats or women on my own retreats, that desire to like get up and go and help, you know, the
Mm,
desire to sort of clear the cups away or clear the table or roll up the yoga mats or whatever it is. And actually that thing of, it is a distraction. It's a
mm,
way we use busyness to distract ourselves, um and it's a beautiful tool to
mm,
shut down the awareness of what we might be turning away
mm,
from. So I think,
absolutely.
yeah, that approach, you know, how beautiful that it was something
Mm.
that arose out of your own your own kind of
My own, I am
perfectionist.
a perfectionist in recovery. It might be a lifetime recovery, but I've definitely come a very, very, very long way in my perfectly imperfect ways.
Hmm. But that should have led to that,
Mm,
like you say, that kind of stripping away, and also a sort of stripping away, but in a place that feels safe,
yeah.
and you know
Mm,
where actually you're able to let the guard down, to let the shoulders drop and
mm,
breathe more deeply, because all of that then supports the process of awareness.
mm, absolutely. And safety is at the heart of what I do. Like it's so important to me that whatever we create is safe in a conscious way, or you know, even in a way that isn't perceived, but just has to have that intention above and beyond. I think because for me, that again was part of my journey, the challenge of feeling safe. And um sometimes it's only when we're given that we realize how rarely we feel it. It's almost like only by holding the safe space do we realize how we've been on guard, how we've been unable to be vulnerable. You know, I think that that's also something that comes from retreat space or just any group container, you know, the possibility to be held with integrity and safety.
I think that the thing that arises for me there as I listen to you is how, You know, you talked about synchronicity in groups and how the right people, you know, just came together by, you know,
Mm.
um, by fate or by circumstance, you know, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in the same way, how the right people you, find the right sort of teacher or right guide or person for them to walk beside for however long. Um, and and so sort of trusting that your own experience has deep value in the way that you then go on to nourish, nurture, work with others, I think has to be my sense is that that's been really vital for you. I know it's been vital for me, and my sense is that it's also been something that's been really important for you, is to trust your own experiences is something that you then grow out of and are able to support others in their growth.
Mm. Yeah. So I heard kind of two things within there. One was about trusting that people who are meant to be there will be there, and I really felt that was true. You know, we are a business. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's not true. There has to be a business structure behind what we do in order to do it. And so we will present things and we want people to come and join us, but we always had a very clear policy that we don't want to sell. So if someone's coming to us, we're like a stepping stone for them. And it might be the next stepping stone is that they continue with Soulshine, or it might be that the next stepping stone is to go on to something else. If it's a healing path, we will be there to support that, be it's with us or someone else. That's super important. And trust, you know, if you're meant to be here, I trust you're going to be here. If you're meant to work with me one-on-one, I trust it's going to be okay. Eventually you'll be here. So that aspect of trust is certainly true. And in terms of the trust of my own journey, what I heard was almost trusting that things can change, that you can emerge from your own journey. Does that feel true to what you were saying, that like trusting the possibility? Yeah. I wouldn't be telling the truth if that was unwavering. There are moments where it's like, whoa. um you know, I just went through two of the darkest years of my life, and my faith was really shaken in what I had done, or everything I'd been doing up until that point, because there was this kind of complete dissolution, which I think a lot of people in different ways have gone through with COVID. It's just like fractured our worlds. And that was really what I experienced, and it showed me what was still there and what still needed attending to. In the depths of it, it was hard to. I questioned Soulshine, I questioned myself, I questioned hope of change. And when you've devoted, you know, decades of your life to this journey and others, that's really destabilizing. And somewhere within it, I remember just having this question of, well, take the teachings. What would you do if a soul shiner were in front of you? Like almost my kind of strategic, I'm a Virgo. So my like, okay, let's do a spreadsheet. Let's do a spreadsheet. Let's quantify a bit more. What is it you've been doing all these years with people? Because it's helping other people. It has helped other people. So let's get really clear on what that was. And then let's walk that path like really clearly, because you know, almost to go back to a question you asked me before, what was my journey to arrive at this point? Um, a brief background. From my teens, I started having very bad panic attacks, which evolved into full-blown generalized anxiety disorder in my 20s, which, as those who experience it will vouch for, is hell. It's a hellish way to live, in a constant state of fear and terror. And you know, in between that, bouts of depression. um, so a lot of emotional turmoil and zero idea about why or how or what to do. And from my 20s, you know, reaching the pinnacle of that at the end of my 20s was a painful period of my life where it was just like, enough, something has to change. And that's when I turned towards this path. And so my 30s, it was discovery. It was like just trying to work it out, learning. And as I went through my 30s, which is, you know, when Soulshine began, refining the questions I was asking, to learning, experiencing, integrating. As I always say in Soulshine, it's about building a toolkit and then you work out which tools resonate for you. And the questions were refining. I remember there was a point where I was like, okay, so these two big questions, why does no one feel like they're enough? Started with me realizing that, and then I was like, hold on, I'm seeing this in all my yoga trainings and all my spiritual trainings and all my this, that. Oh, hold on, I'm seeing this in my guests. What is this brokenness? So getting very curious about that. And also, we're told all we need to do is love ourselves. I'm like, right, all I need to do is love myself. And then it's like, can someone tell me how to love myself? How do you do that? Like, how do you get to that point? So, you know, in my 30s, it was really refining, and then like living it. It was living there. You know, I was just a few steps of what I was teaching and experiencing. And I think, and I hope this felt true for you, I never sat there with like these are the answers. I sat there with like so I'm working this out, and this is really curious, and this feels really helpful, and have we thought about this? And then as I came into my 40s, I'm now 42, and this kind of dark night of the soul, which I say laughing uncomfortably, that was when I had to look back at this whole journey and be like, okay, what did all of this really mean? Like, take all of it and notice a roadmap. And at the same time, I had been really building up my one-on-one practice with clients, in part because of COVID. So as I was connecting into my journey and remembering everything from the retreats and what I'd witnessed, I was also taking people on very long coaching, like therapeutic coaching journeys. I tend to work with people really for a year at a time because of the nature of the work I do. And from that, really, this roadmap emerged, and which I kind of call the Soulshine way, because I feel that's now how I work. That's the process I work around. And I went through that process myself, as well as in the space that I held, and it brought me back to life. And the gift of the dark night of the soul, which you can't bear to even believe when you're in it, that the hope, that drop of hope, is that you come through it with greater clarity, strength, wisdom, and you do. And I'm so grateful for that. So can I say that I've always had hope and faith? No. It wavered, and yet I do believe that this last kind of sort of dissolution and emerging has left me in a place where inherently I have this deep trust. And when you connect into that, it's beyond you. It's beyond what you need to know. It's beyond what you need to work out and do. It's everything. And it's like being plugged into something that's just nectar. So yeah, that was a very long answer to your question, but hopefully it explains a little of my journey.
It's a beautiful, beautiful exploration with you. Thank you so much. Yes, there's something deeply powerful in what you're saying about the value of your own experience, and one's own experience, your own experience of being able to see the truth of how it feels in that dark place, and to have the knowledge of well, there is this stuff here, and if I can
Mm.
just bring myself to it, then it will support me. There's
Mm.
so I had an experience at the weekend actually, which is almost
Ooh,
like a
tell me about
it's like a
it.
microcosm of what you've just described. I mean, in a, you know, a little kind of micro moment. Um, I have always, since being a young child, I've always really, really disliked, I would even say hated, going down very steep things.
Mm.
Never really minded going up them too much, but going down them really, really disorientates me.
Mm.
And to the extent that I realized on Sunday that I've probably been massively suppressing a very, very deep fear. And on Sunday,
Mm.
climbing up a very, very steep, very muddy slope, which was long, I had a panic attack, which
Mm.
I've never had in my life. It's like the first time I've had like the full couldn't breathe, involuntary crying, clinging to the
Mm.
earth, total
Mm.
release. You know, just not, I had no control. Except that while it was happening, there was a part of me. So, this part, my observer self, was here beside me, where she often is.
Mhm.
She's the one who writes My Darling Girls, really. It's her.
Mm.
And she was observing me as I was like clinging to the earth. And what had happened, my depth perception had gone. I'd lost all my peripheral vision, and I felt like I was going to fall off the earth. Like that was what was going on in my
Mm.
body. Was total, like literally fear for my life.
Mm.
And she was there, kind of observing, and then she just sort of reminded me very gently that I actually was able to breathe. And she
Mm.
reminded me like how to breathe. and
Mm.
And then she reminded me like how to feel the mud underneath my hands and just to
Mm.
connect with the mud under my hands. And I gradually felt myself like come back into my body and apply the tools, the techniques, the learning that I have gathered and share with others to deal with anxiety, to deal with stress, to deal with whatever, and to apply them to myself in that moment, to remember that
Mm.
all of that was actually available to me.
Mhm.
And Anton said, I can get you down the hill. And I just said, no, I just need to get to that tree.
Mm.
And I got myself to the tree, and then I got myself up the slope using the tools. But it was
Mm.
that micro moment of what you described. It's like just of the utter hopelessness,
Mm.
and then the remembering. And I think that's what so much of what I took from the work with you. So I've been to 3 Soulshine retreats and have also done some coaching with you as my coach. And so much of what I took from it was the importance of the practice of the tools. That it's not just about, you know, we go on retreat for a few days or even for a few hours, and ta-da, you know, and like you said, sort of with the coaching programs, you know, you do these longer programs. I tend to work with people over kind of 6 months. Quite often it'll extend to a year, because we need the reminders, we need the
Mm.
practice, we need to create the shift in our neural pathways in order that when we really need this stuff, it is accessible to
Mm.
us. That's what I take and from the place that you were in 2 years, well, where you found yourself over the last 2 years, it just speaks to how the depth of that place, but also to the power of the work that you have done to have brought yourself here in this moment. It's astonishing, Soulla.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I think, you know, as you told that firstly, I'm so sorry you had that experience, because, you know, you said as if I were going to fall off and die. Well, that is what a panic attack is, isn't it? Our system thinks we are. Our life isn't truly in peril, and that's terrifying. So I'm so sorry you had that experience. And the word that came through to me was resilience, because resilience acknowledges that it's not about everything being cruisy. It's not that everything is like, oh, now I'm okay and everything's gonna be easy. And
Because I'm like, I'm so
no,
zen.
yeah, no. I mean, been there, did that phase. You know, when I first started yoga, and it was all like, I just had to manifest to the universe and just love and light. And there's a place for that, you know. There is a place for that, but it's not all of it. And you know what I love about mindfulness is it honors the darkness, it honors the struggle of our humanness, and resilience is what empowers us, because it understands that instead of, you know, walking on the street, falling into a very deep hole and staying there for a month, we walk, we trip, we stumble a bit, and then we get out. It's not that it doesn't happen. And so
Yeah.
every time we do that, what we build is self-trust. That like, yes, I can trust myself. So yes, when you go through this experience the last 2 years, I mean, it was devastating in so many ways, and yet to come through it is, I honestly feel like plugged into the universe a bit now. It's like
Feeling
trust,
that.
really trusting, because that's kind of the it's kind of the gift of trauma, if you will. The scope of experience that becomes available to you, it can be so painful, and it can be such a big hole to climb out of when you've had trauma in your life. One that I absolutely believe that you can heal and transform that. But the reality is, I feel to be broken, or to feel so much pain, to be not broken, I need to be clear, you're not broken, to be broken open
That was the
so
phrase.
deeply. Yeah, broken
That was my
is
phrase.
also to open up everything. Tell me more about your broken open.
So sorry, on Sunday when I was trying to explain to Anton and I said I feel like something has broken open inside me. It's brilliant, and I was like
Mm,
laughing, crying,
mm,
still like desperately clinging to this tree that I'd managed to get myself to, and saying this is so brilliant, which obviously makes me sound slightly insane. And saying I'm so
not
glad
to
I've
me.
felt this. I'm so glad I felt this, because now I
Yeah.
know what it feels like. But also utter terror at the climbing up, but knowing that I could, because I got to the tree. So that's the
Mm,
resilience. But this
mm,
feeling like deep down in that root chakra, that is it's the only language that I have for it,
mm,
that it had broken open, like
mm.
something had broken open and grounded me,
Yeah.
actually.
And I would say the resilience, like you said, getting to the tree, but the resilience I had was the possibility, even in a moment of extreme heightened fear, to have the observation, the witness, and the witness that allowed you to have that experience, but maybe not be that experience.
Mm.
So to create the space of unblending, when we unblend, we're not turning away, numbing, or distracting. We're so there with it. It's like, okay, how can I respond now? And that is our resilience. And it's why it forms the foundation of all the work I do. Foundation is, you know, mindfulness and self-compassion. When I first encountered mindfulness, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. I was like, great, I'm really aware of what's going on. now what? I was like, I still feel terrible. I still really feel crappy.
But I really
What?
know that I feel terrible.
Yeah, I remember going on a silent retreat, just be like, this is literally hell. I am so aware right now. And then self-compassion came along, and no one has translated that better for me than Tara Brach, and made that more accessible. And I think that resonates. Both of us are kind of all bow to Tara Brach fans, and then it made sense, because then it was like the noticing was the gateway that allowed for the entry of self-compassion, allowed for moving from reacting to responding. And that just opened into IFS, internal family systems, which changed everything for me, in terms of taking that self-compassion and then bringing it into your system and actually healing those parts of you that are protecting you or have wounded you on a non-intellectual, deeply experiential and somatic body-based way. So they are the gateways, really. And yeah, it takes time. Now, what I'm trying to build more and more are structures and offerings and programs which build that foundation of just keep turning up and practicing. We learn to sail the boat in calm waters. So when the storm comes, we're like, I know how to do this. Still scary, it's still challenging, but you're going to get better at it each time. It's going to get easier because you're going to know how to do it. And that's why we have the discipline of practice, so that we can then integrate that into our life. And that is like the foundation of this roadmap of the Soulshine way. Begins with the mindfulness and self-compassion, then it comes into understanding all the things I wish I understood: attachment theory, the nervous system, negativity bias, all these things. Like, what happens to you when you have trauma, like how, as humans, the neuroscience of how we exist. That was really important for me to understand. Healing it, the reparenting, nurturing of our inner wounded child. And then integration, like how do we regulate our system? Again, exactly what you did on that hillside. That is the integration, right? And then embodiment, which is how do we expand into the truth of ourselves, and we can liberate ourselves from the shackles of our survival strategies. And that's the journey.
That's the journey. So that sort of part around the embodiment, if I'm translating this sort of correctly, so in the experience that I had on Sunday, we were climbing to the top of a waterfall, around to the top of a waterfall to look down, and it was beautiful. It was worth the experience, and as we were
I
like,
just have an image of you like clinging to the mountain going, it's worth the experience.
it's going to be beautiful.
Crying. I will climb the beautiful waterfall.
I'm going to see it. I'm going to be really, really overawed. And it was lovely. But one of the things, like, as I was kind of like walking along, like we got onto sort of level ground, I was walking along and I suddenly had this vision of all the experiences in the past where I've been really, really scared. It's always been climbing down. It's very interesting that it was climbing up that it happened, but I've been really, really scared climbing down. And then the kind of also the anger, the frustration at others not seeing how terrified I was back, in those other experiences. So it was like a kind of Rolodex of memories and emotion all coming along. And in the same sort of breath, the realization that I was also seeking someone to rescue me in each of those experiences. Youngest of 4 children, being rescued was just like, ta-da! Yeah. I'm scared. Oh, okay, brilliant. I'm rescued. Yay!
Yeah.
And the realization that although Anton was astonishing, can I just say, big up to Anton on the hillside, because what he didn't do was try and rescue me. He just let me work it through. He gave me a couple of options, but he didn't try and tell me what to do. But I was able, and I think this is like this kind of this final stage that you're talking about, to release. This was part of the like the broken open, release the anger and the frustration and the disappointment that I've been carrying at all those people in all of those situations for not having rescued me, and also the shame, the guilt, the smallness of all the times when I had been rescued, and just release that and recognize I got myself up the hill.
Mm.
I took myself through it, the resilience. I took myself through it. I used the
Mm.
tools and I made it to the top. And if I decided to go down to the bottom, that would have been equally as brilliant. You know, it's like
Mm.
either way. But I took myself through the process, and that for me is that my sort of sense of what I'm listening to from as you
Mm.
described the Soulshine way is that the ability to apply it, and the recognition that you can continue to do that, and
Yeah.
that can also help you release old pain that you may well have been carrying.
I would say, in a way, it's all of the things. Like the Soulshine way isn't linear. We don't tick one and go to the next. Not that you were suggesting that, but just to give clarity to this point, it's like all of these things can be happening. So you had the awareness first, the foundation, and from that awareness and understanding, there was a possibility of healing and releasing because there was already integration and resilience. So that facilitated healing. And then the embodiment part is having released, processed, healed, climbed that mountain, seen that beautiful waterfall. Which Henny is stepping up in that moment? Like, what do you believe about yourself in that moment? What do you know about yourself? And then how does that define your choices, your actions as you move forward from that place with that trust? You know, not held back by a fear, not looking for rescuing. Then you can keep stepping more and more into your true embodiment of Henniness. So it's kind of all the things happening beautifully
Mm.
to ultimately bring you home to yourself more and more and more.
Awesome, Sula. That's how I felt. And also,
Yes.
awesome, Sula. What you're
Thank you.
describing, it's, and also, you've used the word trauma quite a few
Mm.
times as we've been talking, and it's the recognition that what trauma looks like for one person may be very different than how it is for somebody else. And I think, you know, there's something I'm really fascinated in personally, actually, is, you know, that the the work of trauma experts, like The Body Holds a Score and those incredible
Mm.
books, which I noticed the other day is like number one of the New York Times bestseller list and has been for ever. You know, that this understanding that whatever pain an individual is holding, if it
Mm.
if it was traumatic for that individual, it is or was trauma, and also that means that there is a route through it. And
Mm.
so, you know, the offering that you have created to enable people to to do that work, and to also do it um, with such sort of safety. And the word I've got is kind of grace as well, like safety and
Mm.
grace. You know, I think that that's perhaps part of what comes from being held in such a compassionate place. Um,
Mm.
but I think a big part of your work as well is also about enabling people to connect with others too.
Mm.
And so the healing that we receive just by standing beside each other.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's having worked for the last 2 years predominantly with one-on-one work and seeing the real, beauty and depth of that, and having worked for 10 years or however long it is running retreats, and going through this own process and really refining what I felt supported people. I saw them coming together, which is why, you know, I'm trying to develop these programs, as I say, which allow space for the one-on-one, because it's very hard to replace that one-on-one work, the depth that you can go to with true healing.
Yeah.
But when you bring that into a shared space and you then share an aspect of the journey, it just amplifies so extraordinarily. Because actually, so much of the work I do, which by extension, so much of the pain people are experiencing, because I feel, you know, I just represent what a lot of people, I just speak what a lot of people are probably going through, consciously or without speaking of it, are shame wounds. You know, when we believe we're broken somehow, when we believe we're not good enough somehow, when we believe we're not enough, not lovable, which are such universal beliefs, it's terrifying actually when you start, you don't even have just a little scratch of the surface, you know, how that manifests. And those might feel like really strong words, but that perfectionism, that workaholism, that, you know, the things we often as society call successful, scratch that surface and see what the beliefs are driving it. You know, when we look at all of that, these are shame wounds. And shame is the most painful burden we can carry, because it's like at our core something isn't right with us. And in the words of Brené, my friend, Brené Brown, thank goodness for Brené Brown in the world, shame is healed through sharing. Shame loses its power. The more we speak of our shame, the less power it gets, because shame festers, amplifies, and grows in secrecy. This deep hidden, like, no one can find out. No one can find this out, because if they do, you know, without going too into the depths of it, that's a basic survival, you know, threat. That's how it works in our nervous system. So I feel that that's why groups are also so powerful, because they allow this space for us to, even if we can't express those darkest places, we can see others doing it, and we can start to think like, it's not just me, hold on. Or we can say something and be met by compassion and acknowledgement and reciprocity. Kind of reminds me of what it just came to my mind when I first started in this path of transitioning from advertising, which I worked for 10 years, to wellness. I started as a massage therapist and a baby massage therapist. So I used to teach newborn, well, their parents, how to teach them with newborn babies or a couple of month old, and bless them, really. The massage is beautiful. Massaging your baby is beautiful for sure. But what really happened in those sessions was a space for everyone to come and be with their vulnerability and their fear, and just be seen and share that with other women. Often it was the mothers who were there, in a way that was like, no, you're not alone. And it just came to me then, just that kind of each week, another exhausted, terrified mum would turn up, and all the other ones would be like, no, it's fine. I feel like that. My baby did that. This happened. And that's really what's happening on retreat as well. We're just like, oh, thank God. It's not just me. I'm not alone.
And I think
for our healing, that's really important.
There's something really important there as well about what you said, that it doesn't mean that even we have to express it, just hearing it from somebody else. It's something. So I ran a retreat on Saturday, and it was a much bigger group than I would normally have. So there were 21 women there, and I was curious about, okay, so what's the impact of that, because it's online, you know, like so much of everything at the moment. And actually, it was so beautiful, Soulla. It was, oh, God, honestly, those women, they're just astonishing. The profound connection that can be created even through this medium. I think that's something else which I just find is such a wonderful outcome of the past 2 years. And people kind of recognizing that they can still be nourished and nurtured even sort of through this means is amazing. But I was reading through the chat this morning actually from the session, and there were so many gorgeous comments of people saying, it's so lovely to hear that. I thought I was the only one. And this was about menopause. This was a menopause, about
Mm,
practical compassion in menopause. And so these women who've like been going through this long experience and just feeling that they're the only one. And
mm,
the power of even just in a couple of hours having that experience. So if we extrapolate that out across the program that you're talking about, I mean, it sounds so profound. It sounds amazing, and
thank you.
I just know that everyone who connects with you through it, it's going to be
Mm,
utterly transformative.
oh,
Of
thanks,
course,
honey.
it really will.
I'm good.
Honestly, I feel.
Oh, my love. Thank you. I feel like that too. I feel like that too about it, full of hope and excitement. And I just, it was so hard for so long. I had to work it all out myself. And I just, if I can help anyone find their way on their healing path, then, it's worth it, really. We all have to go through the healing, but at least finding our way to it, being guided to it, and having someone supporting your hand, holding your hand as you walk it, I think makes all the difference rather than having to work it all out yourself
Hmm.
and having no idea. And that's really what I would love, and that's my hope through the work that I do.
There's a there's a question that I ask all of my guests on the podcast. A final question. And it is, if you see this time in your life, Soulla, as a chapter in your book of life, what would the chapter heading be?
And so the phoenix rises. It's quite dramatic. Do you like it?
I like it. I really like it. Is there a subheading that sits beneath that?
There is. I actually, with a bit of preparation for this, have a quote. I love a bit of poetry. So if I may share, it's a Rupi Kaur quote, who I love. I'm not a victim of my life. What I went through pulled a warrior out of me, and it is my greatest honor to be her. Yeah.
I have a number of things on the wall in front of me behind my computer screen. And one of them is a Mary Oliver quote.
Mm.
Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And it's from that very first Soulshine retreat. And it's been in front of me every day. I am so grateful to spend this time with you. And I really would love to do this again, actually. I'd really love you said, I can't even remember what it was earlier. You said, but that's a whole other thing. Oh, I know. It was about how men find the space
Oh,
and the connection that women find. And you said, and that's a whole
mm.
other podcast. I I think that is a whole other podcast.
Yeah, let's do it. I love to have
There's
a chat with you,
yeah,
honey,
to
for
really
sure.
like yeah, to really explore that, because we are all human. We all
Mm,
need this deep connection. It's vital in the truest sense of that word. It is
mm.
vital.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I would be honored. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Oh, you're such a well brought up girl, Soula.
I know. Well, my mum's going to listen to this, so I've got to have my best manners. Hi, mum.
Hi, Soula's
Hi,
mum.
dad. Yes, I'm
Hello to the
42,
whole
but
Demetriou family.
there are a lot of us. They will all be forced to listen.
Oh, my darling. I love you so much. Thank you.
Likewise, darling. My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, my darling.